Ngomong-ngomong tentang makanan yang terbuat dari tanah, tahu nggak sih, ternyata di Indonesia juga ada loh.
Biography of Nelson Mandela. Source: idsejarah.net. Nelson Rolulahla Mandela was born on July 18, 1918 in Mvezo and died on December 5, 2013. His father was Gadla Henry Mphakanyiswa, who was a local tribal chief as well as a member of the Royal Council, while his mother's name is Nosekeni Fanny. Nelson Mandela was the last of 13 children of his father's 4 wives. He was born into a Tembu royal family and is of Xhosa ethnicity, one of the Xhosa-speaking tribes in South Africa. This tribe became known as the Tambuki tribe in the 19th century. When Mandela was born in Mvezo, Transkei on July 18, 1918, Mandela was then moved to Kunu when he was 9 years old. Nelson Mandela's childhood was spent with his 2 sisters in the village of Kunu, South Africa, and often herding cows with his friends. He has an honorary name in his clan, Madiba. Mandela is the first person in his family to attend school, while his siblings are mostly illiterate because they are not in school. Since the age of 7 years, Mandela went to Methodist school and he was later baptized and got the name Nelson from his teacher, who was a Methodist, even though he already has a baptismal name. Mandela is more often called Madiba when he is with his tribal group. When he was 9 years old, Mandela's father died of an unknown illness. Mandela believes his father had a lung attack. After his father died, Mandela felt neglected. His mother then sent him to the Great Place Palace in Mkekazuni and was raised by the tribal chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo. Nelson Mandela considered that he was treated like a biological child by Jongintaba and his wife Noengland. At Mkekazweni, Mandela studied English, Xhosa, history and geography. He became interested in African history after hearing stories from visitors to the old palace and became influenced by Chief Joyi's anti-imperialist rhetoric. But he still sees Europeans as helpers, not oppressors. When he was 16 years old, Mandela, Justice and his friends went to Tyhalarha to undergo the circumcision ritual as a symbol that they had grown up then after the ritual. Mandela was given the name Dalibunga. Nelson Mandela Education. Nelson Mandela attended the Clarkberry Boarding Institute and studied Western culture at the age of 16. After completing 2 years of schooling, Mandela in 1937 moved to Heald Town, a Methodist college in Fort Beaufort, which was also attended by most of the family of the Tembu king, including Justice. While at Heald Town, he learned more about the superiority of British culture and government. But Nelson Mandela was more interested in indigenous African culture. In 1934, Nelson Mandela started his BA, Bachelor of Arts, program at Fort Hare University, where he met Oliver Tambo and KD Matanzima, who were his loyal friends and colleagues. There, he studied English, anthropology, politics, indigenous government and Roman Dutch law in his first year. He even said that he wanted to become a translator or clerk in the Department of Indigenous Affairs. Nelson Mandela took ballroom dance classes and was involved in the performance of Abraham Lincoln. After opposing university policies such as being involved in the SRC, Students' Representative Council, boycott on food quality. He was then asked to leave and Mandela moved to Johannesburg and continued his studies at the University of South Africa after taking law studies at the University of the Witwatersrand. At first, Nelson Mandela thought that Britain was not a colonialist South Africa. But after he saw how British whites treated blacks, known as the apartheid movement, he finally realized and Mandela decided to join the African National Congress organization, which was moving to fight for the independence of South Africa. After joining the ANC, Mandela was increasingly influenced by Sosulu's thinking and spent a lot of time with Sosulu, including his old friend Oliver Tambo. In 1943, Mandela met Anton Lembede, a nationalist who opposed a unified racial front in colonialism and imperialism or with the communists. Although Nelson Mandela made friends with whites and communists, Nelson Mandela fully supported Lembede's views, and believed that the people of South Africa should be free from British colonial rule and determine their own destiny. At Sosulu's house, Mandela met a woman named Evelyn Mays, a nurse and ANC activist from Enkobo, Transkei. The two then married in 1944, and from Evelyn Mays they had their first child, Madiba Tembi Tembekile, born in February 1946, and a daughter, Makazi, who was born in 1947 but died 9 months later from meningitis. The Durban Rally, Nelson Mandela addressed 10,000 people and campaigned against the government. Because of his anti-apartheid activities, Mandela was later arrested. Over time, many ANC activists were arrested. From 20,000 ANC members it was reduced to 10,000. The government carried out mass arrests and issued the Public Safety Act 1953 to legalize these arrests by imposing martial law. Mandela was repeatedly detained for sedition activities. Mandela was tried in court from 1955 to 1961 and he was ultimately found guilty. In 1961, Mandela and the Communist Party of South Africa founded the militant Umkhonto we Sizwe. On August 5, 1962, Mandela was imprisoned in Marshall Square, Johannesburg Fort on charges of inciting workers to strike and leaving the country without permission. Then on October 25, 1962, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and on June 12, 1964, he was sentenced to life. In February 1985, Mandela refused his release on the condition that armed struggle cease. Mandela was released on February 11, 1990 on the orders of President Willem de Klerk after coming under worldwide pressure. Mandela and Klerk later won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 and held multiracial elections in 1994. Nelson Mandela was elected president and served as President of South Africa from May 1994 to June 1999. Mandela became the first black president with Klerk as deputy president. Mandela is also considered a figure against black discrimination or apartheid. The Mandela government focused on efforts to abolish apartheid by eradicating racism, poverty and inequality and reconciliation. The AIDS problem became the problem that Mandela regretted the most because he did not pay much attention to the problem. Mandela's son, Mvezo Mandela died on January 6, 2005 after contracting AIDS. End of apartheid. Nelson Mandela has many supporters from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Libya, and Algeria. Then when Mandela went to Sweden, he reunited with Tambo, and then while in London, he performed in an international tribute for a Free South Africa concert at Wembley Stadium. While encouraging other countries to support sanctions against the apartheid government, in France Mandela was greeted by French President François Mitterrand. In Vatican City he was greeted by Pope John Paul, while in England he met Margaret Thatcher. While in America, he met with President George H.W. Bush and addressed Congress. He was very well known among the African American community. While in Cuba, Mandela met Fidel Castro, whom he had long admired, and the two became friends. In Asia, Mandela met with President R. Venkataraman from India, President Suharto from Indonesia, and Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia before visiting Australia and Japan. In May 1990, Mandela led an ANC multiracial delegation with 11 government Afrikaner men. He impressed Afrikaners on African history and led to the lifting of the Groot Schuur Minute, or the government lifting the state of emergency. At the ANC National Conference held in July 1991 in Durban, Mandela was appointed president of the ANC in place of the ailing Tambo, and the multi-gender and multiracial national executives were jointly elected. Mandela occupied the headquarters of the ANC, which was purchased at Shell House, Johannesburg. In December 1991, at the Johannesburg World Trade Center, CODESA, Convention for a Democratic South Africa, was held, which was attended by 228 delegates from 19 political parties. From the ANC organization itself, led by Cyril Ramaphosa. At the close, de Klerk gave a speech in which de Klerk condemned the violence by the ANC. CODESA too was held in May 1992. De Klerk forced post-apartheid South Africa to use a federal system and asked for guarantees for the safety of minorities. Nelson Mandela refused and demanded that the law be fully controlled by the majority. After the Boipatong massacre by Inkatha militants assisted by the ANC, Mandela cancelled the negotiations before attending a meeting of the Organization of African Unity in Senegal. In July 1993, Nelson Mandela and de Klerk visited the United States to meet Bill Clinton separately and were awarded the Liberty Medal and the Nobel Peace Prize in Norway, respectively. Nelson Mandela's government. Nelson Mandela was the first black president in South Africa, who served for 5 years from 1994 to 1999. Mandela was sworn in Pretoria on the 10th of May 1994. Mandela was not a president with experience in government. After serving as president, Mandela chose to live in a quiet family in the area between Johannesburg and Kunu. He later wrote an autobiography entitled The Presidential Years but abandoned it before publication. Nelson Mandela found living alone in silence more difficult. So he turned to a social life by keeping busy daily with meeting world leaders and celebrities. And in Johannesburg he worked for the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which was founded in 1999, which focuses on eradicating HIV, AIDS, village development and school construction. In 2002, he inaugurated the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture as well as the Mandela Rhodes Foundation, which was founded in 2003 at Rhodes House, University of Oxford, which focuses on postgraduate scholarships to African students. Nelson Mandela's wedding. Mandela first married Evelyn Ntoko Mays in 1944 and divorced in 1957. His second marriage was to Winnie Madikizela in 1958 and divorced in 1996. On his 80th birthday in 1998, Mandela married Graca Machel, a widow, from former Mozambican President Samora Machel, who is also a friend of the ANC. Nelson Mandela's death. Nelson Mandela decided to retire from the social world in July 2004 due to his deteriorating health. On December 5, 2013, Mandela was reported to have died at the age of 85. South African President Jacob Zuma officially announced the death of the former president. Thus, the biography of Nelson Mandela may be useful.
Ngomong-ngomong tentang makanan yang terbuat dari tanah, tahu nggak sih, ternyata di Indonesia juga ada loh. Nama makanan tersebut adalah ampo, yaitu cemilan tradisional dari Kabupaten Tuban yang bahan baku utamanya adalah tanah liat. Eits, tapi tanah yang digunakan dalam makanan ini bukan sembarang tanah ya, melainkan tanah yang harus bertekstur lembut dan bebas dari batu, kerikil, ataupun pasir. Kamu juga nggak perlu khawatir, karena tanah liat yang digunakan dalam makanan ampo sangat bersih dan tidak terkontaminasi oleh kotoran hewan. Bahkan masyarakat sekitar menganggap bahwa ampo bermanfaat untuk menguatkan sistem pencernaan dan mendinginkan perut. Hal tersebut ternyata sesuai dengan manfaat tanah. Berbeda dengan masyarakat Haiti yang menggunakan tanah di sekitarnya tanpa dipilih, sehingga bisa saja tanah tersebut sudah terkontaminasi kotoran hewan yang mengandung telur parasit seperti cacing gelang. Hal tersebutlah yang membuat kue lumpur itu berbahaya. Meskipun kedua makanan tersebut sama-sama terbuat dari tanah, namun kualitas makanan tersebut berbeda. Jika yang di Haiti tidak baik untuk kesehatan, namun yang ada di Kabupaten Tuban justru memiliki manfaat dan baik untuk kesehatan.